Not everything that holds our interest actually helps to make our lives better. And I'm willing to bet you can say the same thing about yourself, that you've poured your time into people and places and environments that felt good. They were interesting. They were familiar. They were comfortable. They didn't exactly move you towards the direction you wanted to go, but they were enjoyable nonetheless. And the reality is, with so much demands made on our time and so much stress attached to how we spend our time and who we spend it with, it's really time that you and I get more aggressive about who and what deserves our attention. Because interests don't always enhance what it is you're looking to be or do or become. There's a difference between the two. There's a difference between things that simply you like doing because you enjoy them, things that you do because they are fun to do, but they're not the same as the things you do because they're an investment in yourself or an investment in others in very specific ways that align with your values. And we're going to talk about that. In fact, there are even things that we do that enhance our lives, but during periods of time and in specific moments of our lives, they are actually interests. So, give you a clear example, and this might be touchy for some of you. Like most of us, we have to work. We have to work to pay bills, to make a living, and you may very well love what you do. But there are always periods of time where even the work you love and enjoy doing is not an enhancement. It might be an interest, something you want to spend your time doing in the moment, but you're better off leaving it alone and stepping back to recalibrate and make sense of the world around you, or reassess what you're doing so that you can get a handle on other important areas of your life. Work is a necessity, but it itself is also not always an enhancement every single moment of your life. That's why there are limits set on when people work and why it's important you should set limits on when you work. And I'm probably preaching to the choir if you're struggling with this, because I think I've been there. I deal with that all the time, quite frankly. And I have learned and continue to learn how important it is to be intentional, to discerning when me needing to work is important and should be viewed as an enhancement to how I'm using my time, and when actually working is becoming a hindrance. Each month, I actually make a very conscious decision to take a day off, or at least the majority of a day, because I need space to invest in my core values. I have some very specific core values: cognitive rest, writing, building relationships with my family and social circle. And while others may take just a few weeks to do that, I'm intentional, taking a few weeks over the course of a year to do it. I'm intentional about doing it more frequently throughout the year. Cognitive rest is something I value because it allows me to deliberately withdraw from other people's needs, other people's demands, to focus on resetting my own mind, my own will, my own emotions. Because when I do that, when I come back to work, I'm much more useful and beneficial to the people around me. I use that time to really expend extended moments sitting, listening, extra time to pray, extra time to read scripture, because that's a part of what I consider my devotional life. Sometimes I take a long drive. I intentionally go to where there's lots of trees, and it allows me to move through nature so I can reflect. I'll take 4 to 6 hours of time on those days. Sometimes I go to a retreat center and I walk through nature. I sit in the chapel. I sit in one of the buildings that may not be heavily occupied at the time, just to journal and reflect. It's intentional space that I create for myself to get cognitive rest from the demands of what is typically a very rigorous and busy life: work, family, if you're caring for elderly family members, or you're caring for smaller children, or you're just caring for other extended areas of life where you have other responsibilities, that time can be a sacred and useful time. I use that time to write. I carve out the mental space to write and work on projects that are in the hopper that I know I need to finish, take to the finish line, because I value the contributions I'm able to make in that space if I give myself the room to do it. And I talked about relationships and family life. There are times I step away from work, use that day so I can be more present at home, to be a better listener, to support my son and serve his needs as my wife is handling her own projects and needing the space to reset her day or focus on her specific needs. This makes my time away from work not passive, but an investment. It's a deliberate one. It's intentional. Sometimes you can go ahead and continue working when you should be pulling back, and you're finding yourself that you're more of a problem or more of a headache than a help. There are points, and I can recall this very explicitly, where I have engaged in work on days I was supposed to take off, and I didn't add much value to that space. I got things done, but there was a miscommunication. There was a misunderstanding about a particular detail. And so I, rather than added value to the moment, I didn't create space for other people who, in my absence, could elevate their own talents and skills and do what they needed to do. And it created a bit of frustration, not just for myself, but for others. And so, in the span of how you use your time, understand how important it is to determine if it's an interest, if you're using it on an interest, or if you're using it in an area that actually is an enhancement. Now, there's a cost to engaging in things that are just interests, right? When it comes to an interest versus an enhancement, they are both an investment of some sort. They both require an investment of time. They both require an investment of your energy. They both require an investment of your tangible resources. But here's the difference. Interests matter only to the extent in which they can add or be turned into something that adds value to your life. Now, it doesn't mean that you don't do things just because they're fun. Listen, we need to have fun. But the primary motivation of your life can't be driven by interests, right? But the primary role of an interest is to help us experience enjoyment, to spark curiosity, right? There's nothing wrong with that. But it does become a problem when we are pursuing interests solely for interest's sake, when interests become the predominant way in which we use our time, instead of some very discrete things that we do, that we invest our energies in to become an enhancement that adds value to our lives and the lives of other people. At some point, an interest must develop the muscle to move from being something that is passive engagement, where you're simply receiving information, to a higher level behavior of direct engagement, where you're generating new connections, where you're able to move into what I describe as constructive practice, right? It's causing you to dialogue, talk about something, co-create meaning. Why? So that it helps you then begin to cultivate what you were interested in as a result of your direct engagement of it, right? Not being passive, just receiving information, but generating connections as you're engaging in it, and then putting what it is, the connections that you've made, putting it to practice, testing it out so that it can be something that you actually can utilize and it become an enhancement in your life. Because when you make a deliberate commitment in utilizing your time, talent, and resources In that way, you actually become better. You do better. And then the people around you are and become better. Okay. I'll give you the brain science around that, these concepts that help me develop these principles in another episode. But the big picture I want you to have today is that your time, your energy, and your tangible resources they are always being expended. They are always being collectively rallied toward a common objective, whether it's one that's a passive objective or an intentional, deliberate one. It's you and I that make the decision as to where we will allow our time, our energy, and tangible resources to be used. In fact, we make the decision of whether we're going to allow it to be used and manipulated or effectively managed by ourselves based on the decisions we make about the kind of engagement we participate in. Is it going to be passive engagement or deliberate engagement? Is it going to be purposeful engagement? Will it be passive engagement or purposeful engagement? Now, there's data that tells us and gives us some clear sets of data that we can lean on about how people use their time. I want to talk about that for a moment. While none of the activities I'm about to describe now are actually problematic, they do carry a cost. And they only become a problem when we spend time on them to such a degree that they hijack the energy, the time, and tangible resources that we know should be going to other areas of our life that have been under-resourced or underdeveloped. On average, the typical person spends 3 to 8 hours a day in school or work. They spend another 2 to 5+ hours a day online browsing or on social media. They spend another 2.6 to 3 hours of time watching TV or streaming, even smaller amount going to physical exercise or recreational activities at being 0.3 to 1.5 hours a day. But here's the most startling statistic that I found that stood out for me, at least. It's the area of personal development. Most people spend roughly 0.2 to 0.5 hours a day on activities that could reasonably be classified as personal development. So the average person only spends anywhere between 0.2 to 0.5 hours per day of activity of their time on an area that could significantly add value to their life. Activities that they could leverage to enhance their life. I talked about this in the prior episode, the 3 V's for intentional enhancements. There are 3 V's that you need to engage in order to make very intentional, deliberate enhancements to your life, to even turn an interest to an area that will improve or to an activity that will improve your life and the life of others. Here are your 3 V's. You need values, you need vision, and you need velocity. Values are your beliefs. They're the guiding principles of your life. They're the standards you set that guide your life. They help determine what it is you will do and what it is you will not do. It is your values that helps to shape who you spend time with and who you don't spend time with, the kind of person you're willing to be around, the kind of individual you will not allow yourself to be around, the ways in which you will do work and won't do work, your values. They are the standards, the principles that guide your life. So here's a few examples. In personal life, it could be a personal value can be someone who is fiscally responsible. You're committed to being fiscally responsible in all of your dealings. Maybe as someone who's courageous, that you're not willing to back down just because something looks difficult, that a personal value of yours is showing courage, demonstrating courage, and taking risk. In marriage, it could be affection and intimacy, right? Strangely enough, that's not a value for everyone in a marriage, but being intentional about making sure that affection and intimacy is a part of the structure of your relationship. You're not leaving it to chance. You're not allowing other people to railroad your time. You're not allowing work. You're not even allowing your children to railroad your time of affection and intimacy that could be of value in your marriage. Lord knows a lot of us, that's an area where we're constantly working through. In your work, of value can be someone who is an ethical decision maker. It doesn't matter how good it sounds or how much it will give you a leg up. You're committed to being someone that if it's not ethical, you will not engage in it. You will have no parts of it. You won't even entertain it because you're committed to being an ethical decision maker. Values are those things that help shape how you engage the world and how you engage others. They are a means of accountability to yourself for how you interact within the world and your sphere of influence. Then there is vision. I talk about this in another episode I did early on about the difference between vision and dreams. Visions and dreams are different. A dream is inspiration, but the vision is implementation. Dreams are inspiration, but vision is implementation. So what does that mean? A vision is a strategic map. It is a set of deliberate actions that you put in place that helps turn the mental picture of what you see possible into a reality. So you need your values that guide your life, what it is you will and will not do, who and who you will not spend time with, how you will and will not use your time, your energy, and your tangible resources. And you need vision. You need to be clear about the steps you're going to take to bring what it is you envision into reality. Those two pieces alone help you see how you begin to shift an interest into an area of enhancement that improves your life. Then there's velocity. Now, this one might be tricky for some, or makes it, how does that fit? Well, velocity is not about speed. Velocity is about how is the rate in which you're making progress towards a specific destination. So if your vision is clear, if you have a clear vision for where it is you're going to go, then you now can begin to set the accountability measures or the markers for how much progress you're making to get to where you want to go. So velocity is about the rate of progress. So let's say you make a decision to wanting to, this isn't low-hanging fruit. You'll probably get annoyed by this, so just bear with me. But you have a vision for improving your health by gaining more muscle. And you have a plan. You've written out a plan for gaining more muscle. Maybe you're particularly skinny. You want to put on more meat on your bones. You want to build some more mass. And so you follow a specific meal plan. You follow a particular workout plan. You eat at particular times of day, and you avoid eating at other times of day. You build a specific structure, a vision, that strategic map about the goal to gain more muscle mass. Now, velocity is the rate in which you're making progress. You know that if you are very modest in your incorporation of macros and micros into your diet, depending on the ratio, that can impact the rate in which you'll make progress to achieving your goal to gaining more mass. Right? So velocity means you are paying attention to the amount of macros you have, the amount of macros you're taking in and micros you're taking in. You're paying attention to those ratios because you know if you take one more in than the other, it will impact the rate in which you make progress. One will help you get there faster than that. And so you're paying attention to the velocity, which means you're paying attention to the contributing factors. You're saying, what are the factors that contribute or demonstrate for me that I'm making progress? If you're doing a regular weigh-ins in the first month of being on this plan to gain more muscle mass, and you're seeing a shift from week to week, a particular rate of change as a result of the habits you've built in, then you can begin to have a sense of how long it will take you to get there because you are paying attention to the rate in which you're making progress towards that specific destination. So you need to have values, clear values, a vision, a specific one, that strategic map for clear actions, and velocity. You need to have now be able to track how you're getting, how much progress you're making to get to your destination. You can always move fast without purpose. Plenty of people speed on the highway for no given reason other than to speed. We know where that has led a number of individuals, right? It's created great catastrophe when people take action at a fast pace without clear plan of action or reason for why they're doing it. They don't have any values that guide it. They don't have a clear vision for why they're moving as fast as they are. And because they don't know why they're moving as fast as they're moving, the rate of change that they're measuring doesn't exist. They're actually taking everyone else for granted. They're not paying attention to it, which puts them at risk and other people at risk because they're not looking at the potential dangers because they don't know the implication of what their speed or their rate of movement and what their speed is doing to the environment. So velocity is not speed, it's rate of progress, it's rate of change, and it requires you to have measures in place to identify whether or not you're getting to your destination within a window of time you say you want. So when does interest become an enhancement and when don't they? Not all interests are equal. You must decide whether an interest is leveraging your values, giving you space to create a vision, that strategic map for accomplishing what it is you want to accomplish, and if it's honoring velocity, if it's creating, if it's allowing you to identify what are the measures that you can use that show that you're actually making the growth or improvement or progress that you're looking to make. Some interests will undermine them because your values and vision are not clear. And as a result, you can't adequately measure the velocity in which you're heading in the direction you are. You are living a passive life. You're actually allowing things to happen to you rather than being intentional about how and what you're engaging in and with whom you're doing it with. Enhancements are intentional. So I can give you a layman's example. I like TV. And guess what? Sometimes I watch television just because it's white noise, right? It's background noise for me. I'm not intentionally watching it to learn anything. For example, I watched this show. I saw this series, The Diplomat. And as I watched the show, great series, enjoyed it, but I didn't watch it for the purpose of it adding any specific value. I wasn't watching it with the intention of making what I saw an opportunity to improve some area of my life or behavior or a mindset. And I could have if I wanted to. I engaged in it passively for enjoyment, which is okay. Nothing wrong with it. But I didn't participate in it with a sense of directed engagement, where I was looking to have it be a useful source of information where I could extract a lesson. Let's say I watched it again. If I watched it again with the intention of seeing how they dealt with conflict, how they managed the power dynamics in relationships, what it felt like to be in conflict with an individual, still pursue a common cause, and live through the tension of not seeing eye to eye while you're pursuing that common cause, because I wanted to utilize that information for an upcoming leadership training I was doing. If I watched The Diplomat with that lens, I would have extracted a whole lot of it because I would have been engaged in what I describe as directed engagement. I would have been there to generate new connections in my world to what it was I saw. I'll be using it to extract from that world, that television show, lessons that could be applied to real life I can connect to the way that you can navigate, deal with conflict, power, and dynamics of leadership. In fact, there's an old movie that I go to from time to time intentionally, that I don't watch passively. Actually intentionally watch it to help recalibrate my views and perspective around leadership, around perseverance, around team building, and especially when I'm know I need to shake up my view of what it means to identify people who represent markers of success. It's the film Glory Road. In this film, a coach from Kentucky who really was identified as being responsible for desegregating the college basketball league, the NCAA. I watched and examined how he made decisions for identifying players, where he got them from, where other coaches looked at high caliber schools or more affluent communities. This coach sent his assistant coaches out to the hood and to urban communities that were often overlooked. He went deliberately looking for players who could add new dimensions to the team that didn't already exist, to help create a winning team. And that meant they were team members of different colors and hues and different strategies and approaches to the game. And he put all of those players together to create what has become and became a championship winning team, but a team that also disrupted the norms of what a competitive basketball team looked like. And so I watched that team for that reason, to help shake up how I viewed identifying talent, how I viewed what it meant to create culture amongst individuals that I work with. When I was paid attention to what were some real attributes of team building that were not necessarily in line with traditional points of view of building a team or encouraging teamwork. Right. So there were tangible things I was looking from that experience. My engagement was not passive, it was active. I was looking at it to generate new connections. That was a directed engagement. And because of that, because I did that, I was able to then engage in some constructive practice. I was able to tinker with the idea, talk through what did that look like in my context, and then create meanings or scenarios for how I can make something like that play out in my own leadership and in my own work with the team that I work with. And in doing that, I moved to an implementation space where I'm practicing it. And as I practice it and see positive change, it becomes an enhancement. So I could have watched it being passive with no clear intention for how I was participating in viewing that film, but I didn't. Instead, I did just the opposite. I utilized that as an opportunity to look for specific actions or characteristics or behaviors that would help shake up how I viewed my practice or implemented my practice in my own team. And then I began to apply it. And as I did to see change, it became an enhancement. And because I put it to some practice in my real world setting, the impact of that showed itself up, of course, in the people who were connected to where I was putting it to practice. And so as it worked, and some things worked, some things didn't, but as things that worked did take effect, it became an enhancement for me and for others. So you can be passive in something, or you can be intentional. Enhancements actually support your growth to the next stage. An enhancement helps you refine an existing skill to make it better. It also helps you tap into a new skill, something that is underdeveloped, that you have the capacity to develop, but has not been tapped. Enhancements refine your thinking. They help you develop a new way of thinking. And as a result of a new way of thinking, it shifts your behavior, how you operate. So when you think about interests that are stay at the passive level, where you're simply just engaging in it, you're being a passive participator, as opposed to being intentional in how you engage it to make an enhancement, you can see the difference it makes. Now, here's the thing: there are activities that you could participate in that are unintentional enhancements, meaning you didn't deliberately engage in it to create some specific change or improvement or difference, but because of the mere design of the activity that you were engaging in, it had its own effect. For example, you may be someone who enjoys puzzles like Sudoku or jigsaw puzzles or crossword puzzles. You could be doing that because, hey, it's just passing the time away. But whether you intended for it to have an effect or not, it is. You are actually sharpening your problem solving skills. You're actually improving your ability to be patient, right? All those kinds of crossword puzzles require you to think out the box, think critically about the question that's posed in that crossword puzzle, or the riddle that's there, or the number sequence in the Sudoku puzzle, right? It's causing you to be a problem solver. In as you develop problem solving skills, that takes time. Problem solving skills takes time. You have to sit with something, you have to think through something, which in turn creates in you and fosters patience. So you are unintentionally developing a higher level of patience than other people who may not engage in a similar activity. You are cultivating and strengthening a sense of perseverance. Your ability to stick with something until you solve it because you're committed to engaging and solving that problem that the puzzle presents. And another unintentional enhancement is that it actually reduces stress. Did you know that something like engaging in solving puzzles and working through those kinds of puzzles actually, scientifically, the research shows, actually improves or reduces stress levels? So you can engage in, you can have an unintentional enhancement. You can engage in something that you were passively participating in, but unbeknownst to you, because of the nature of the activity, it was forging in you skills and behaviors that could enhance you. That's definitely the case. That can happen. However, there is a problem when you allowing the majority of your time being spent in engaging in something that's an interest and doing it passively in hopes that it gives a payoff to enhance you. There has to be a level of intentionality in how you're using your time, your energy, and your tangible resources. When you don't, when you're hoping that something just takes off because it's an interest and you're hoping it works, that's not sufficient enough. You're actually putting yourself at risk of being misused because you have a finite amount of time and a finite amount of resources, cognitively and materially, right? Not even the wealthiest person in the world can buy the world. Could solve a lot of problems, absolutely, but they can't buy the solution for the whole world. And so it brings me to this scripture that we want to remember. Psalms 90:12 says, "Teach us to number our days carefully, so that we may develop wisdom in our hearts." So, because you have a finite amount of time and you need to be very mindful in how you're using your time, your energy, and your tangible resources. Because when you do that, you're acting with wisdom. So, we don't have unlimited time. Both interests and enhancements will demand our time, our energy, and our tangible resources. So it's critically important that we move from simply engaging in a multitude of interests to whittling down our attention to areas that can actually become an enhancement, because it allows us to serve ourselves well and others even better. helps to maximize the benefits for everyone connected to us. And anything that you expect to enhance your life has to be tied to those three V's: to your values, to your vision, and to velocity. And people who know the benefit of scrutinizing their interests so that they can honor their values and the clear vision that they've set for where they want, what they want to accomplish, and the velocity by which they're going to be paying attention to that shows them how they're getting there and how quickly they're getting there. These are the people that actually enhance their lives. These are the individuals who are more likely to establish momentum in their life because they've cut the noise of all the other possible interests that are vying for their attention. And instead, they're whittling their attention down to the few things that matter most because it equips them to be the most effective in meeting the needs and the opportunity to serve themselves well and others around them. So this week, this is what I want to encourage you to do. I want to encourage you to take one practice that clearly aligns with your values, that nurtures your vision, and that sustains a clear sense of velocity. Some clear velocity gives you a picture of what it would look like if you stayed with it over time, what your end result would be, how fast you get there. I want you to identify what that one practice will be and begin to put it in place. Don't allow it to just be something you talk about doing, something that sounds like you hope you one day you can do. Make an intentional commitment to get it done. So there is no longer a passive experience for you, but it becomes something that enhances your life. Momentum doesn't come from doing everything. Momentum isn't forged by doing more. Momentum is forged by doing a few things on purpose so you can take care and live. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you have, I invite you to like and subscribe to this podcast and share with a friend. It keeps us in the algorithm and creates space for other people to learn and also share this content. I'm also going to invite you to visit my website, takecareandlive.com. You can learn more about my book, The Momentum List. We discover how to delight in time rather than be mastered by it. It's available at many online booksellers. It will change your life and how you see time and how you recenter your life on values so that you can cultivate a life that's driven by enhancements. That really helps you hone in on what matters most. And I'm excited to connect with you again in our next follow episode where I'll get into more of the brain science behind these ideas, these concepts and principles I've talked on today. And you don't want to miss it. Until then, take care and live.